Yes. As you are well aware of the fact that there were two parts of Canada, that is one Upper Canada and another is a Lower Canada. Upper Canada was dominated by the Britishers, Lower Canada was governed by the French people. And finally, the Britishers overcame the French part of the French colonies, and ultimately they were dominating the Upper as well as the Lower Canada. Though there is a, you must have heard French language is there, that is the reason when the French people have ruled them. But finally, in 1867, the UK Parliament passed the British North America Act 1867, whereby a dominion of Canada and the provinces have been established, meaning thereby a federal structure was adopted in Canada through this BNA Act 1867. This act was not passed by the Canadian Parliament. Canadian Parliament was created under this act. So this act was passed by the UK Parliament. A federal structure, maybe because of the ABC reasons, we may say it is a quasi federal structure, but in a sense it was a federal structure. 4 provinces joined the Dominion. Upper Canada, 1 province, Ontario, 3 provinces from the Lower Canada. You just Nova Scotia and Quebec and 1 other province, right? Thereafter, there is a provision under the 1867 Act that the other provinces may join. And finally, you can get, I'll send you the brief note regarding this, when the other provinces had also joined the Canadian Dominion. So subsequently, the other provinces also joined the Dominion. And interestingly, neither there was a provision of amendment of this BNA Act, nor there was a provision for any Charter of Rights or fundamental rights, which we commonly know, was made in the BNA Act. So fundamental rights or Charter of Rights provision was not there, amendment provision was not there, and even the Supreme Court was also not established under the BNA Act 1867, though there is a provision of establishment of judiciary. Then a ordinary legislation was passed by the federal Parliament establishing the Supreme Court of Canada, but the final adjudicator was still the Privy Council. But in 90s, ultimately the Privy Council was taken away, the power of Privy Council was taken away, and the Supreme Court of Canada was declared the final adjudicator for all the disputes within the jurisdiction of Canada. Now, in 1875, there was a consensus arrived at between the provinces and the federal parliament as well as the Prime Minister of UK, to the effect that now no amendment can be was to be initiated or passed to the BNA Act unilaterally by the UK Parliament. But they have reached to a consensus. The consensus was that either the province or the federal parliament initiate the passing of a resolution for the amendment to the BNA Act, and then they have passed the resolutions consensually, and then the federal parliament shall make a request to the UK government to carry out that amendment in the BNA Act. UK government then lay that bill before the UK Parliament, and UK Parliament should have passed that. I am using the word in future, but don't take it. It is everything was passed. Now it is nothing which is in existence in law at the present time. So ultimately, the BNA Act was to be amended only when there is a request from the Canadian Parliament. Then finally, in 1982, in the similar way, a request was made to the UK government to pass a Canada Act 1982. It contains only 4 sections, and it has a schedule attached to it. That schedule is a Constitution Act 1982. The BNA Act 1867 has also been renamed as Constitution Act 1867. Another Constitution Act 1982 is not an independent legislation, but a schedule attached with the Canada Act 1982. This is very important. Now, the provision of amendment, provision relating to Charter of Rights have also been introduced under this Constitution Act, and there is a complete transfer of power from UK Parliament to Canadian Parliament, meaning thereby after the enforcement of these enactments, the UK Parliament was completely completely lose the control over the dominion of Canada in any form. So the final authority of legislation, executive, administrative now vests with either the federal parliament or the provincial legislatures. So this was the complete constitutional transfer of power to the dominion of Canada. So there was, like in India, there was no agitation, there was no independence movement, but it was a smooth transfer of power. Now under the 1982 Act, there are 10 provinces, 3 territories. Now we are coming to that question. Those provinces have joined under the Constitution. So they are the part and parcel of the Constitution. Whereas these 3 territories have been allowed to join the Dominion of Canada under an ordinary legislation of the Parliament. This is the major basic difference, right? Now, we have already discussed the sources, which I am discussing about the sources and nature is there. Then there is a provision for amendment. There are 5 types of amendments from section 38 to 45. And then there is a chapter pertaining to federalism. We have already discussed in detail. Then the next chapter is judicial review. We have completed it a day before. Now today we are going to discuss about distribution of power. Now, what is the meaning of distribution of power in a federal structure? In a federal structure, what is the basic idea of federal system? Federal system means a division of power itself. So these are complementing each other. If we say distribution of power, it means there is a federal structure. If we are saying federal structure, it means there is a distribution of power among the different bodies. One are central body and others are regional bodies. Now, under section 91 and 92 of the 1867 Act, a complete list has been given. Under section 91, all the matters which have been listed under section 91, the federal parliament has the competence and jurisdiction to legislate on that. Section 92, all the matters which have been listed under section 92 of the 1867 Act, the provincial legislatures have the competence and jurisdiction to legislate. Very fine, there is a distribution, it is clearly demarcated under section 91, 92 and some of the other provisions of the Constitution, like section 11, section 30, section 32, there are other provisions. So the Act has clearly demarcated the jurisdiction of each of the body, that is the central body as well as the regional body. So we can say the federal structure is moving in a right direction, moving within the prospects of the and the parameters of the Constitution, because section 52 says Constitution of Canada is the supreme law of the land, and any law contravenes the provisions of the Constitution is ultra vires. So meaning thereby Constitution is the supreme body and the supreme law has delineated the powers of all the bodies, that is the central body, federal parliament, and the regional bodies, that is the provincial legislatures. I am using the word only legislature because we are discussing within that particular arena of law. The administrative law, there we will discuss the administrative powers, executive powers. Again, in judicial review also we have discussed only the power of judicial review to determine the veracity, validity and constitutionality of a legislation only. So regarding distribution of power also, we are only discussing the competence and jurisdiction of the legislative bodies to legislate. So, from the face of it, it seems everything is perfect. But there must be some inconsistency, some law which falls within the ambit of federal parliament. The provincial legislature has passed the law. There is an inconsistency, there is a conflict. Some matter which falls within the jurisdiction of a provincial legislature, parliament has passed the law. All right. If the matter is clearly listed, the Supreme Court may say, or the court which is competent to adjudicate this issue may say that yes, the matter falls within the jurisdiction of this regional body or the federal body. The court may declare it as unconstitutional if it is clearly demarcated and the scope of that law clearly shows that it falls within the particular matter. But when there is a doubt, the nature, the object, the purpose of the act shown to be the provincial, but it is affecting in a major way to a matter of parliament or the federal, then how to resolve it? So in a sense we can say that when there is a conflict, there is a contradiction of different legislations passed by the provincial legislature and the federal parliament, then the distribution of power and the principles evolved on it helps us and the courts to understand whether this is a good law or not. And then those principles governs ultimately the distribution of power where there are gray areas. Now there is a principle established in New Zealand and UK that is called implied repeal. What is the meaning of implied repeal? Implied repeal means when there is a contradiction, when there is a conflict of two laws, then the latter shall not prevail. Latter shall not prevail. Meaning thereby the previous law will hold good. When there is a conflict, there is an inconsistency. This principle, this doctrine has been adopted by the New Zealand and UK also. But there is a reason. There are no provinces. There are only one body, one authority. And the laws passed by that body are to be considered whether those are inconsistent in point of time. But in Canada, this is not so. There is a federal body, there is a regional body in the shape of federal parliament and provincial legislatures. Now, no problem if there is a provincial law. Suppose Ontario provincial legislature has passed a law and subsequently again passed a law. Now the subsequent law is contrary to the previous law of the Ontario province only. Then we can say yes, the doctrine of implied repeal is applicable and the law passed later in time shall not prevail. But the provinces exercise their jurisdiction within their own limits. And when a provincial legislature passed a law which contravenes the law passed by the other province, there is no conflict because the operation of law having a specific territory, and that law, suppose there is a law passed by the Ontario legislature and there is a law on insurance only, there is a law passed by the Quebec legislature, but both the laws are contrary, inconsistent with each other. Here we can say both the laws have the operation of application within a particular territory. They are not operating beyond their territory. So they may exist. They may coexist also. So in this case, no principle is required, no doctrine, application of doctrine is required regarding distribution of power. But when there is a inconsistent law passed by the federal parliament and the provincial legislature, how to resolve it? What are the principles which help us to maintain that constitutionality of distribution of power? And the first principle is, yes. Yes, we have already discussed this doctrine of implied so this part we have again discussed. Here, yes, one thing more. Why we have to understand and resolve this issue? When there is a inconsistency between the federal and the provincial law. Why? Because both the laws operates on the same territory. Why? Suppose the federal parliament has passed a law relating to banking that operates in the whole nation. It operates and applicable in all the territories of the provinces. So, a federal law is applicable to a particular province also. Suppose there is an inconsistency between the law passed by the legislature of Newfoundland and the federal parliament. The federal law is applicable in the territory of Newfoundland also. So in the applicability of both the laws, sorry, there is a inconsistency and resulting into the conflict. Then the rule is federal paramountcy. Now this principle, this doctrine was established, that is called doctrine of paramountcy. That is, the federal law, if there is a conflict, then the federal law shall prevail. But how to resolve a different issues? It says conflicting laws passed by the federal and the provincial laws, the federal law shall prevail. But the condition is, when we understand this distribution of power, that both the laws should be valid. If one of the law is invalid, there is no question of understanding the distribution of power, and no conflict is there because one law is not valid. So first thing is that both the laws should be valid, and second, there is an inconsistency. So for the application of this doctrine, the two mandatory requirements are that both the laws should be valid and there is inconsistency in both the laws. Then judicial activism and judicial restraint. These two terms have also been developed during the understanding of this distribution of power. Judicial activism means more weightage to the federal law. Provincial law, judicial restraint means more weightage given to the provincial law. Suppose there are both laws passed by the federal parliament, provincial parliament, there is some inconsistency, but while interpreting, the judiciary may weigh with either the federal law or the provincial law. So judicial activism, we can say when the judiciary is interpreting in favor of the federal law. Judicial restraint means the judiciary is interpreting in favor of the provincial law while interpreting. So most of the cases in Canadian legal history, the courts have adopted the second path, that is the judicial restraint, and not the judicial activism. Now, impossibility of dual compliance. First issue is that there is a law passed by the federal parliament, there is a law passed by the provincial parliament. Both the laws are there, and it is impossible to comply with both the laws. So there is an inconsistency. It says, now Martland judge says this, that if there is a law and its application is not possible, then the federal law shall prevail. The federal parliament, if passed a law which is a valid law, one of the province has also passed a law on the issues or the matters which are within its jurisdiction and competence under section 92. The court has examined the competence and jurisdiction say on the principle of judicial reviews, which we have already discussed, and found that both the laws are valid. Both the legislatures have passed the law within their own competence and jurisdiction. But one is overlapping the other. One, say we are not discussing overlapping, we will discuss later on. The dual applicability of law is there, and for a citizen, whether he should follow the federal law or the provincial law, this is the difficulty. So this principle helps us to understand and apply the principle of distribution of power. Now, first example is of this conflict is discharge of debt. Now, there is a case where one person was declared insolvent, his properties are put to auction. Now, for the discharge of the debt, the federal law says that the first, suppose I am not giving the exact facts, I am just giving you an example to understand this. It says the first discharge of debt should be for the maintenance of the parents. Second, for the maintenance of the wife. Third, if any amount left, that should be given to the bank. So this is the priority given by the federal law while discharging the debt. Whereas the provincial law says no, first discharge the liability of the bank and then the parents and then the wife, suppose. So both the laws are in conflict. Then the court says the federal law shall prevail because there is a clear conflict between the laws and the federal law